Okay, everyone. Sadly, in the last video, I made some errors, so I'm re recording this segment. We are looking at low investment supports. Let me put this in presentation mode. These are units that require some energy recharge, maybe, and only one main stat, and they have almost always a viable 4-star or even a 3-star weapon available to them to get most of their power out. So unlike the other classes in the game, you don't have to put much into them to make them come online. So, granted, while that's true, these are going to contain some of the strongest and some of the weakest units in the game. Um, I guess let's go over the tiers. Meta defining units are units that are stable in the meta. They are played often and will continue to be played often. This is because they have good power levels and good flexibility, so they work in many teams. Units that are busted are going to be just as strong or sometimes stronger than the meta units, but they typically have narrower use cases. Strong units are units you can use and can build and can work very well, but they're not quite as strong as the busted units. I think overall we're going to have the most in the strong tier, though maybe not in supports. Viable units, these units are still usable but lacking something, or maybe their use case is just way too small to really be something you want to invest in. And then we have Dory tier. Sorry, Dory. These are characters that just I can't find a good way to use them, and I really thought about it. So let's start off here with Jean. Jean is a full party AoE animal healer. She's useful specifically with Bennett and say like Xiao in a Sunfire comp, or with Fiorina for her full party heal, which is very strong. All she requires is a Viridescent stat, a high base attack weapon, and some energy recharge. So, Jean's very, very strong. I remember early game her damage was pretty respectable, but now she's been outscaled. Barbara's a unit I played a lot when I was a low adventure rank just starting out, as I'm sure a lot of people did. She has the lowest investment requirement in that she can use Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayer. She doesn't even need energy recharge. I think you get a Maiden Beloved set for the quest, so you can just slap that on her, give her some HP, and she'll do her job. So, unless you're really getting slammed, she'll be enough healing, good for low level overworld exploration. She's just outscaled by healers that do more than her later. Mona is useful in specific nuke setups or in a specific freeze setup, right? So her use case is kind of narrow, but what she really needs is some energy recharge. Yeah, her damage exists and she can buff the team, which is very useful. But I think she's very strong in those specific situations and doesn't require an enormous investment. After we found out that Bennett was good, right? Because he's energy positive, he gives a lot of healing, he has a tremendous attack buff, and he has a cleanse, all these things. We just were underwhelmed with him in 1.0 because he doesn't have a lot of personal damage. That said, I think Bennett has been and will continue to be an exceptional unit. He just needs some base attack, hit points, and some ER. C1 is pretty important, but you can live without it. And you'll end up with enough Bennett's just playing the game. I think he's obviously great. Chongyun, right now, I think he's been reduced to a specialist. He was more important when our roster was limited. The attack speed, the cooldown reduction, The cryo infusion are all nice things to have, but in my opinion, I've only been using him to break electro shields. He's very good at that. Kind of underwhelming elsewhere. His burst does a good amount of damage if he has some crit stats. He can be a nuke, but there are just other supports or sub DPS that will bring more to the table. Chi-Chi brings a lot of healing. I think one of her first big issues is her energy generation is non-existent. So even then you can kind of mitigate it by running a sacrificial sword on her, which I've done. But still, it's pretty lackluster. Her skill up times 50% otherwise. And while her healing is good, she brings very little otherwise besides the healing, and she's been power crept for a very long time, which is kind of sad. So she's here. She's not good, but if you need someone to heal you, she doesn't. In certain situations, Venti is the best unit in the game because Venti has phenomenal, incredible grouping. And now I realize I'm a sucrose. If you're facing a large crowd of enemies and they're small, Venti is the number one unit out there. He's incredibly powerful. However, if you're facing a unit that can't be grouped, there are better options. So it's kind of like in his spot, he's amazing. Not in his spot, he's pretty weak. But I still think overall that's busted strong. Remember, here we are looking for their power level, not their flexibility. Right? So Venti is not as flexible as he used to be because of the enemies they've been coming out with. But his power level is extraordinarily high. Moving on, we have Sucrose. Now, Sucrose is a reaction support. She has CC. She can swirl, of course. And she can also act as a driver in certain teams, such as Sukokomon, for example. And her buffs are actually incredibly strong. I would say maybe she needs a little more investment than the average people supports in that you really want her C1 and you really want sacrificial fragments or an ER weapon, such as the Favonius Codex on her. But, she doesn't need much else. In return, you get an incredible reaction buffer. She's definitely busted. The only reason she's not meta is because Kazuha exists. Diona. Diona is shield. She's an energy battery. She has movement speed. She has healing. At C6, she has elemental mastery. So she brings a lot to the table. I think Diona is actually a pretty strong unit. It's just she doesn't bring any damage. And maybe that's her weakness. However, she's very easy to build. All you need is, say, a sacrificial or Favonius bow, plus a bunch of HP artifacts, and you're all set. And she's very, very versatile. You need a shield, you need a heal, whatever, Diona's got you. So I actually think she's really good. Zhongli, especially since his 1.4 buff with the resistance shred, has been a staple in our meta. He has the strongest shield in the game by far. He's very cheap and easy to build in that the only stat he cares about is hit points. The literal only thing he cares about is hit points. So you can even run Black Tassel, triple HP artifacts on him. His ult is nice, but it has a long animation. Might not even be worth casting sometimes. That said, his shield is virtually unbreakable. He will make a huge impact on your account and take almost no investment. So he is definitely meta-defining. Xinyan here suffers from split scaling, and that means that her shield scales on defense, right? So you want her to have defense, so her shield is valuable. But her constellations make you feel like she's an on-field physical DPS, so you want to have offense for that. And when you combine that with the fact that she's a physical pyro DPS 4-star, her kit is just very confused. It's not coherent. It's very difficult to make her work. Yes, she can do some damage. And yes, the shield is okay, but sadly, she's one of the weaker characters in the game. I don't think she's completely non-viable, though. Moving on, we have Kazuha. Kazuha is good on any Petch team that is Pyro, Hydro, Electro, Cryo, Hydro team. Any of those teams, if you can swirl it, he's great. His advantage over Sucrose is that he can work in mono element teams, mono Pyro, mono Hydro, mono Electro, I guess. Any team like that, he's really good in freeze teams. So Kazuha is extraordinarily versatile and extraordinarily powerful. And, you know, basically, since his release, even though his first banner didn't do well, people quickly found out he's incredibly strong. So he's been in the meta since then, and he always will be, as far as I know. Sayu's one of my favorite units. I love her for the overworld. She swirls, she heals, she farms ore really well. Really, really great in those situations. That said, her power level is just not as high. She does less healing than Jean. She does less damage than all the other anima supports. And on top of that, she doesn't group. So she's usable, but her power level is not that good. That said, I really, really like Sayu. I'm glad I built her. One of my favorite characters. Moving on, we have Kokomi. And Kokomi is the poster child for flexible. She has incredible role consolidation, meaning she can apply off-field hydro, she can heal, she can tank, she can drive, right? She's resistant to interruption in her burst. She has access to Thrilling Tales and Tenacity, so she can buff. And on top of that, she requires very, very little investment to come online. Maybe some HP or healing power. She doesn't even need much ER. So she has been in the meta. She will continue to be in the meta. She's great for all those reasons. I would say, though, she is the character that has one of the highest floors and lowest ceilings, in that as you invest on her, she doesn't get much better. But once she's online, she's really quite exceptional. Toma, he's basically being used as Pyro Zhongli. He's just weaker Pyro Zhongli in most cases. He does need energy, which Zhongli doesn't need. So he's not quite as good that way. I think the one niche he has is specifically in Burgeon teams, where you stack a bunch of elemental mastery on him. But even if you build that team specifically, it's not going to be great. So he's fine, but not wonderful. Kuki Shinobu went from one of the least played units to one of the most played units. And she did that when Dendro came out. And the reason is she scales well on elemental mastery, and she's an excellent hyper bloom trigger. So you don't need to do much except give her an iron sting, which is craftable. Stack elemental mastery on her, and she will trigger your blooms, your hyper blooms, apply electro, and heal your active character great. So her investment requirements are very, very low, and her output is very, very high, and she's quite versatile. So she's in the meta and will continue to be here. Dory's kit is, like a lot of the weaker characters, Dory's kit is confused. Her skill doesn't do a lot of damage. her healing scales on HP, her damage scales on attack and crit, and even then, her electro application is pretty poor and slow, and the heal is not that great, and the energy funnel is okay, but a lot of electro units generate energy. I'm thinking of Fischl or Raiden will give you more energy than a Dory. Kuki will give you more healing and electro application. Like, I just can't think of a reason why I would bring Dory to a fight. So, it's my personal opinion she's the weakest character in the game. If you have a good idea of how to use Dory, let me know. Candace, where she buffs normal attacks and gives Hydro Infusion, is a very, very niche character. The times I've used her is to infuse Kuki, use Kuki as the driver to trigger Hyper Blooms with the Hydro application, and I think she's pretty good at that. I don't think Candace is that bad, but her use cases are so narrow that it's hard to say, oh, I really want Candace in my team. So she goes here. Nilou, I'd say the one reason why you might not consider a low investment unit is that she has very limited weapon options. So her weapon is really, really strong for her because there are very few, if any, HP scaling swords. Other than that, my understanding is talents don't even matter. All she needs is a bunch of HP, and her passive takes care of the rest by bringing the bountiful blooms into the party. She does not have to be on field. You can just activate her skill, switch her off. But she's incredibly strong and changes your teams completely. She's just a little bit narrow. It's my opinion, Nahida is one of the strongest units in the game. She only requires a bunch of elemental mastery. She doesn't need her constellations, though they are nice. Her signature weapon's nice, but she also doesn't need it because of, I think, the Everbloom. I'm forgetting the 4-star weapon. And she has access to the magic guide at 3 stars. But all you need to do is stack EM to the sky. She has triple scaling, so qubit scaling on elemental mastery. She just needs 1 stat. Her burst is up all the time, even without ER. Her skill has a really long application. She's astonishing unit, and you get that for almost no investment. So she is completely busted in meta defining. Basically, any team you want Dendro in, you want Nahida in. She is far and away the best Dendro unit, and Dendro units are strong in general. Moving on, we have Layla. Leia is a cryo shielder. I think she's very similar to Diona in that fact, but she has a little more damage than Diona, but no healing in her kit. I think in general, I think Layla is just kind of worse Diona, but I do know that Layla is a slightly more popular in the meta. These two units are very similar. I just think Diona brings more. My opinion, of course. Next we have Yao Yao, and I think Yao Yao is great. She's a Dendro healer, which is awesome. Her Dendro application's pretty strong. She doesn't need constellations even as a 4-star. She needs some energy recharge and some HP. So pretty low investment unit. She's kind of just good right out of the box. Her burst has a ton of Dendro application, which can be really nice. I think she's actually very, very strong. And, if you have a Yao Yao and you need a Dendro healer, you might as well build her. She doesn't really require much. Moving on, we have Dea, and Dea has the same issue as Xinyan in that her kind of mitigation abilities, her mitigation field, you want to build her hit points for that. But for her burst, which does also take up quite a bit of field time, you want to build damage for that. And then the third strike against her is that she doesn't synergize with normal attackers such as Xingqiu, Yelan, Fischl, etc., which could have made her really good, but it just doesn't work because of how her burst is coded. So, again, I'm actually really sad about this. I thought Dea was a great character. Um, I wanted her to be good, but she's just not. So, um, yeah, this is sad. Baiju is a Dendro healer. He also brings a shield. He has good Dendro application. He's easy to build. And if you have Baiju, you're probably playing Baiju often. He's really quite strong. Um, I didn't pull him because I think a lot of times Baiju and Kokomi are relatively interchangeable, or even with Yao Yao. But overall, he's very strong unit. If you have him, build him. He's good. And right now, he's very much in the meta. Moving on, we have Kiara. Kiara is a Dendro Shielder. That's kind of what she does. Her damage doesn't really exist that much. So she's here. I think that I did this last video. These 4 units are pretty similar, though I think Xinyan's the worst of them because of her split scale. But they all bring decent shields. I think that Diona brings the shielding plus the healing, so she's better. And Zhongli's shield is just far and away the best in the game. Right? So these are shielders, which are, nice to have, but you have better options. Charlotte's a full party healer. She's an attack scaler, so you doesn't have the split scaling issue. She does a lot of cryo application, and she's very, very good in like Purina freeze teams is where I've been using her. I think she's actually an excellent unit. She doesn't need constellations. She doesn't need specific weapons. I'm using an old event weapon on her. So I think she's just plain strong, right? I think she's just good and worth building. Now, that said, it's all about what you need on your account, what supports your teams. But I would say if I was pulling, I think, let me see, Kuki over here. These 5 units are all incredible. I would recommend basically everyone to pull Kaza and Nahida. I think Zhongli is very, very strong, especially if you're a new player. Kokomi is also very strong if you're a new player. And Baiju, if you're building out a Dendro team, is also very strong. All these are good pulls. Well, they're the only limited characters on the list right here. Venti is really powerful, but not needed anymore because he's not viable in a Viz 12. And Nilou, it's kind of like if you want to play a Nilou team, great, go do it. They're good. But she is far less flexible than the other ones, which is why she's not in the meta. Okay, though, so that's the low level support, low investment support power tier list, right? So this is based on their power level, and none of these units require a lot of investment. Thank you. See you in the next one.